Hi, everybody, and welcome to our Q&A with Director Jeff Daniels. I'm Mary Dossinger. I'm the Program Manager of RiverRun, and I'm so excited to be here today talking with you, Jeff, about the incredible film, one of our 6 films in our documentary competition called Television Event. It's an incredible film about the 1983 made-for-television film, The Day After. And thank you, Jeff, again for joining us all the way from Australia today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary. It's great to be able to screen this film.
Yeah, I want to get started. It's generally the question I ask every documentary filmmaker at the beginning because I always think it elicits interesting answers. Documentary films are not for the faint of heart, I think. They take a long time to make, and so I'm always really curious about what initially drew people to this. Obviously, I think a lot of people have a history with this, with The Day After, but what exactly drew you to tell this story? And yeah, just a little bit of that background would be great.
Sure. I was 5 when The Day After came out.
So was I. We're the same age.
Yeah. So I mean, it was definitely not an appropriate thing for me to watch, but my whole family, they're all from New York, and they all lived there at that time, and we all piled into our grandparents' basement to watch the on their big screen, this TV movie that it turned out 100 million other Americans were watching at that same time. And they had the sense to put me to bed before the iconic bombing sequence and all the other horrific stuff. So but still, I got it. There was blanket publicity for this TV movie, and images of mushroom clouds that look like skulls, and I mean, it was pretty clear that this was something pretty devastating. And it led to me asking questions. And my grandfather, he was a photographer during World War II with the U.S. Army, and he photographed Nagasaki and the effects of the bomb from the epicenter up until in that whole area. And he had stories that he told. So nuclear war and the effects of nuclear war was an ongoing conversation in my family. And I think that The Day After kind of sparked my interest in questions about what is this all about, and it stuck with me. And so, later in my teens, I ended up watching The Day After. And, as a documentary filmmaker, when you're asking questions about how storytelling in any form influences necessary conversations, it seemed like The Day After really was a unique example of how this form of popular media can affect so many people and start an urgent conversation with not just the United States, but around the world. I felt that was a story worth telling.
Yeah, no, and it is amazing. I think you brought up, being 5 when you first saw it, and then seeing it again, had things really stuck in your mind? Because it seems like the people I do talk to about it have such strong feelings and visceral feelings about having seen that film and remember it, over 35 years later. So I just find that so incredible. I mean, obviously that was something that drew you to it, but could you remember things you had seen when you were 5?
Yeah, I remember I actually spoke to the woman who turns into a skeleton. That sort of where she gets vaporized, and I remember my mother studied. She studied nuclear physics to a degree and was able to, say that's pretty. It's an artist's rendering of what would happen, but you really do vaporize instantly, and I felt like the conversation I could have with my family. I was the youngest by far in my family, so I got to speak with cousins who were in their teens and 20s, my aunts and uncles who were in their 30s, 40s, grandparents in their 60s. Each of them had a different take on this and had some personal understanding of the issue. And so, as I was growing up, my questions became more advanced, and I my faith in and adults, and how fallible they were. You know, I think that came at a really early age. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that my family was able to kind of scaffold that understanding of the complexity of this issue, and why the United States would, you know, bomb twice a civilian population, you know, cities, and the effects of that, and why it's important to understand the effects of that, and how it, you know, how that can affect families, communities, how things break down. You know, it's incredible the conversations that I've had with people, family, friends, others. All of them have either seen or heard of The Day After, if they're age 35 and over.
Right. Yeah, it is really remarkable. And I think one of the things I think you see in the film that I also thought was really interesting is, I mean, it makes sense, but the people that were involved in the making of the film clearly still have such intense emotions and, you know, remembrances of the making of the film, from obviously the director. And, you know, there are some difficult personalities discussed in the film as well. In the making of it, did you ever get to the point where people really were like, no, I can't talk about this anymore? Or had it been long enough that you found that people were really willing to share and look back on it in a really honest way?
It's I think having an understanding of the questions that you ask, and the experiences people have, and, you know, a sense of trauma that they experience that comes up, is something that documentary filmmakers are really required to be aware of and sensitive to. Yeah, and some of the people who, when I was interviewing, I interviewed about 2 or 3 times the amount of people you see on screen, and had to really whittle that down. And I felt that some people represented quite a lot. Ellen Moore represented both an actor in The Day After, as well as a person, you know, a person from the city of Lawrence, Kansas, and a child. You know, she really was able to represent so much of what it was like to experience being a part of this production, and what it meant to come out. And you know, she talked about how she lives in New York City now, and talked about her experience living through 9/11, which I was in New York during that time. And that was pretty horrifying. And a lot of her recollections of filming her city for a month as a post-apocalyptic wastelands, that all came rushing back when she saw people rushing in supermarkets to get whatever they could while you know, 9/11 was happening. And you know, and it comes back. So it's you know, it really is incredible what that experience was, and how important it was really for the people of Lawrence to participate in in whatever way they could, by sitting in their car for 12 hours on a highway as they were filming that iconic scene on the highway, or rushing through the supermarket, or being in the field house to show thousands of people who are eventually going to die of radiation. I found that quite inspiring. You know, these people in Lawrence, Kansas understood the importance of what they were doing. And I just felt that that was important to document. And yeah, it was quite a process speaking with the people who lived through that.
On that note, I mean, there are so many different elements of this film between, I mean, you could make an entire film just on the politics behind network television and all of the things that go with that, and, you know, the sponsorships and all of that element. You could make an entire movie just about the director, you know, and then you have all the people of Lawrence, Kansas. And how did you go about, did you have an idea of that before you started shooting? Did what you shot, you know, kind of move the story in different directions? How do you even go about trying to take what I'm sure was many hours worth of footage to make the film that you did? If you could talk just a little bit about that artistic process and the storyline.
Yeah, something I love about documentary film is the hunt for archive in any form.
Right.
Archive that's part of collections or private collections. In this case, it was made up of found footage of people who were able to sneak past the security guards and capture a few shots of the production, and others who kind of entered and got special permission to shoot behind the scenes, moments, and all of that was made up of people who'd either I had to speak with people who knew people who knew people who may have a canister of film that was about to deteriorate, and I was able to save by getting it, redone, and lots of VHS collections that people had.
Sure, 1983.
Yeah. So I think that hunt for archive allows me to understand what I can present, and that really is a very strong part of my process. I started as a researcher working with Ken Burns on his jazz documentary series, and had the best experiences going through people's basements and looking at photos of Billie Holiday, and it was amazing, and I just fell in love with that process. But on the other side, I was trying to think of the angle. As you're saying, there's so many different directions to go in to tell this story. I felt, why not tell this story of the Cold War, which has been told so many times and represented in so many different types of documentaries, features, series. Why not look at the Cold War through the perspective of a commercial television network, a family-friendly network, the makers of Happy Days and Love Boat. Right. I just thought this is going to be really interesting. And when I was able to get interviews with the director of the film and feel so much there of how he felt I'm getting a chance to speak to my values and to what I believe in, I'm going to take advantage of this. And I thought risk-averse TV network, passionate Hollywood director, this is going to be interesting. And it was.
That's amazing. I mean, and as someone, I mentioned this a little bit at the beginning, I knew almost none of it. So to me, every little tidbit that was thrown in was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Oh, now I want to know so much more about this thing. And it was just really well put together, which is why I wanted to ask about that. And I'm sure that's so hard because, again, you've learned so much about it, and you have to eventually just put in the things that mean the most to you, or tell the story as you want to tell it, but just know that it was incredibly well done. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
But also, we touched on this a bit earlier, but I think because you tell all those stories the way you do, you brought up a little bit about memory and fallibility of adults and all of that. I mean, when you're telling a story from the memories of people from so long ago, it's interesting. And, did you find that sometimes people's stories conflicted with one another, or, they just remembered things completely differently, and then when they heard other people's, they kind of changed their minds? I'm just so curious about it, because I think overall that's one of the most interesting things about the film is just that idea of memory and how memory changes our future as well, like just the way we look back on things. And anyways, if you can talk a little bit about that and what you learned about that during the process of making the film.
Yeah, I ended up speaking with quite a lot of people who were involved in the production at different stages, and tried to get some consensus, because I found that their stories didn't change. When I'd say, oh, this person said this, they'd say, no, that's wrong. This is how it happens, and that worked to my benefit in a way to create sort of back and forth in the interviews. I guess my job as a storyteller is to stick to the point and the message I'm trying to make there, while trying to find exactly what did happen, and stay true to that in the timeline that I offer the film, so that I'm keeping it fact-based, but also emphasizing the what people feel to be true, and try and get some understanding of what that means, whether it's true or not, it's true to them, and that's important in some way. So it took quite a long time for me to really try and get a timeline that was made up of consistencies that everyone could agree with, so I can lean on that, and then just kind of keep the he said, she said kind of thing going on, for the sake of making other points. Yeah, it was interesting. Some people keep extensive notes on things, and yeah, it was very interesting. It was a very
Well, I'm
interesting
sure because
process.
you have it from your family as well. So you're getting it from the actors, from the executives, from the
Yeah.
director, from even then your family too, and how they responded to it. And it's just it's fascinating. And I loved that angle of it because it is just so people are fascinating. And so you're getting so many incredibly interesting stories and personalities and I just
And
really
there's so much that was not in the film. So
Oh,
much.
I'm
So
sure
much.
entire people that didn't make it into the film. Yeah.
And people
Um,
who are coming out of the woodwork now and saying,
oh,
"Oh, I
really?
was part of this," and I thought, "Oh God, if only I
You
had
have to
spoken
make
to
a
you before."
television event too.
Mm.
Okay, so for my last question, but this is also something that you already touched on, which I, I have to admit I heard in a Q&A you did, but I really responded to it, is that one of the things that I got from your film, not just because it's historical, but it really is a time capsule of a period that I don't think could ever really exist exactly again or before that or anything. It was that very specific pop culture, but also historical time period between both Cold War issues and then the way television worked at that time and the way pop culture worked at that time. And it's so fascinating to look at from that time capsule perspective. And in doing that, you're talking about how how amazing visual storytelling was at that time, but then you're also explaining it through your film as well. But one of the things that, and just that idea of shared experience and all of that, but I guess my question to you is, what do you hope the audiences most take away from that? And I know you talked about that a bit with just with the politics of it, but just curious your feelings on that and really what at the
Mm.
core are you trying to get audiences to take away from it?
Yeah, I'm proud of how I was raised to scrutinize what certain people in positions of authority say and what they promise us, our leaders and things like that. And that's helped me to really understand the value of discussing points of view on issues and listening to different points of view and understanding how to question that, because it gave me a faith in the fact that we can all come together and and have a discussion and learn something from each other that we may not have otherwise been patient enough or willing to listen to. And it seems like with the with the election of Trump in 2016, that really came to a head. Seeing people very close to me who just had difficulty speaking with each other about their point of view on politics or on issues of social issues, other urgent issues. I just felt that, this is a necessary tool of democracy for us to be able to come together and have this discussion. So when I saw how the day after created this moment when, when the day after came out, there were more people watching network television in the United States than before or since. Right. The month in December, the numbers started going down and went down since, so it was truly an incredible moment that the day after was able to capture. And because of that, people, despite their differences of opinion, came together and talked with urgency about the issue of nuclear weapons, nuclear proliferation, nuclear war, and the effects of that. And what a great democratizing moment that television was able to offer us through this, through this incredible production of the day after. Which you can say what you want about its how it was made and its artistic merit and storytelling and all of that. It created. If you're a human being, you had an emotional connection to this story. Enough for it to allow you to start talking about that. And I felt, this is important to document and to show, especially at this time, that, you know, we as Americans, we, you know, people around the world, we can come together and talk about issues that are urgent to us. And that's a very important thing for, you know, for us to be represented you know, in our countries in a democracy. We are capable of coming together in discussion. You know, it happened then, it can happen now. So I guess that's really what I came away with when I was researching the story. And I hope that that's one thing that some people can keep in mind when they watch this film.
For sure. I mean, it was amazing, and I just think shows you the power of TV, movies, but also storytelling. And then and honestly, thank you so much for making this film and for highlighting that, because I fully agree with you. I think it's incredibly important, and I do think your film highlights that incredibly. So thank you so much for that. And again, thank you so much for being here with me today, and also for allowing us to highlight this incredible film at RiverRun. We're really honored to be a small part of the film's journey. So thank you again so much, Jeff. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you, RiverRun, and everyone who watched the film.
Thank you.